playing the video game Minecraft gives you a really amazing and wonderful way to escape from your normal, boring, and everyday life. Today, I am going to build up Drill First version. One single minute, I can just be a normal, regular person who is doing all the right things and functioning well in the real world. And then, the very next minute, a random thought might suddenly pop into my head saying something like, you know what? I think I am going to build a giant city deep underground. And why not do it? So, that is exactly the kind of big project we are going to start working on today. And while we dive deep into this huge building project, I will also be sharing some of my absolute favorite and most creepy scary stories with you. The very first scary story we are going to talk about today comes from a place on the internet called the r/scary stories subreddit. And it was written and shared by a person who uses the username code _exile1911. I have basically stolen this story from my own channel, and I have a feeling that my family is starting to get a little bit suspicious about where I get all my material. The story begins when it was late in the month of September, and I had just arrived back at my house. I had just finished spending 2 whole months away from home at a summer camp experience. I cannot really remember a lot of specific details about the camp itself or the people who were in charge of running it. My time spent there was mostly nice and enjoyable, with the only bad exception being the time I got completely lost and turned around during a group nature hike in the woods. By the time I finally managed to figure out where I was and walk all the way back to the main camp area, it was way too late. The entire campgrounds were completely empty and deserted. My parents were totally shocked and surprised to see me standing there when I walked through the front door. "Max, you are finally home?" my mother asked me, walking towards me very slowly and looking me up and down from my head to my toes before she dropped down to her knees to give me a huge hug. My father was standing in the doorway, just watching us from a distance. He quickly turned around and walked away into his den, probably because he was still feeling very angry and annoyed with me. Before I left for that summer camp, I had done something really bad with some of my school friends, which was breaking into my dad's locked gun cabinet. During that crazy event, my friend Benny accidentally fired one of the guns, which made a huge hole in the wall of the house. Thankfully, nobody got hurt by the bullet, but all of my friends ran away and left me standing there holding the smoking gun. When my dad found out about this terrible accident, he gave me a very strict and serious talking to about how stupid my actions were. "Do you completely understand just how incredibly foolish that thing you did was? You are extremely lucky that nobody got hurt," he told me in a very angry voice. "I would normally ground you and make you stay in the house, but honestly, I am just really relieved that you will be out of my sight for the next 2 months." After saying that, he walked me out of the den and locked me in my bedroom without giving me any dinner. I was just sitting there reading some magazines that Benny had secretly given to me during class when I heard a knocking sound on my door. When I opened the door, I saw my sister, Riley, standing there holding a plate full of food. "Mom told me to sneak this food to you," she said, pushing the plate against my chest. She was physically taller than I was, and I guessed that her big, puffy hair, which smelled super strong from all the hairspray she used, made her look even taller than she actually was. I looked at her carefully, noticing that she was wearing a vest made of blue denim over a black t-shirt that had the band Black Sabbath printed on it. And she also had a bunch of different necklaces hanging around her neck, which was a style of jewelry that she liked to wear all the time. "Are you going somewhere tonight?" I asked her. "No, you little idiot. I just dressed up like this and put on my war paint before I go to sleep," she answered back with a mean sneer on her face. "Do Mom and Dad know about this?" I asked her while taking a bite of the broccoli on my plate. "They do not know, and you better not tell them either. If you do, I will tell them all about those dirty magazines you have hidden under your bed," she threatened me. She had me completely trapped, so I just nodded my head and agreed to keep my mouth shut. Later that same night, after my parents had gone to bed to sleep, I heard the sound of Riley's window opening and creaking. I just went back to bed. The next morning, I walked downstairs to eat breakfast. We were having pancakes, eggs, and bacon, which is a special weekend tradition for my family. My father was already sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee in front of him, reading his newspaper. He usually does not talk to anyone until he drinks his second cup of coffee, but today he was being extra quiet. He must have still been feeling mad at me for what happened. Riley did not come downstairs for breakfast, which was totally normal for her when she stayed out all night. Are you excited to go to summer camp, sweetie? My mother asked me. I just nodded my head while my mouth was full of bacon. Is your friend Benny going to be at the camp with you? She asked while putting a plate of food in front of my dad. No, he has to go to summer school instead, I answered, looking over at my mom. I could hear my dad making a grumpy noise from behind his newspaper. He never really liked Benny because he thought Benny was a bad influence on me. It was not until the early afternoon that Riley finally walked downstairs, still wearing the same Black Sabbath t-shirt she had on the night before. Her hair was a messy disaster, and most of her makeup was wiped off, leaving only a little bit of dark eyeliner around her eyes. She gave me a quick look as she grabbed a plate that was covered in plastic wrap from the microwave. Then she sat down next to me on the couch and started watching cartoons with me. What time are you supposed to leave for camp? She asked me. I think it is around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I answered, not being completely sure about the exact time. What is the name of the camp you are going to? She asked me. I think it is called Camp Manatari, I told her. Oh, that camp is in a town called Sleepy Falls. I remember we went there once for a family vacation when you were just a little baby. It was a really weird and strange place, she said to me. Weird how? I asked her, curious about what she meant. I am not really sure. I just remember that something felt wrong and creepy about that place. Maybe it was just because I was 7 years old at the time. The world looks much bigger and scarier when you are a little kid, she said with a small laugh. You are still a kid yourself, I joked back at her. Yes, I know. I will be graduating from high school next year and I will probably move away to go to college. Mom is going to be so sad about it. You need to take care of her for me, okay? She said, messing up my brown curly hair with her fingers. I could smell the faint scent of cigarette smoke sticking to her fingers. I had tried smoking a cigarette one time with Benny, and it felt like a burning fist was punching the inside of my throat. It was about 2:14 in the afternoon when a big bus with the words, Camp Manatari, painted on the side pulled up to our house. I gave my sister a big hug, and my mom kissed the top of my head. My dad was outside to watch me leave, but he did not say a single word to me. He did not even shake my hand, which was what he usually did when I was leaving for a long trip. The bus ride took about 4 hours until we finally arrived at the small town of Sleepy Falls. The bus drove through the winding streets of the town's market area. The local people who lived there came out of their shops just to watch our bus drive by. Not a single person waved their hand or gave us a friendly smile. They just stood there and stared at us in silence. When we reached the edge of the forest, it took another 20 minutes of driving until we finally arrived at the camp. The camp counselors met us at the sleeping cabins and told us to grab our bags and go to the rooms they assigned to us. The first few days at the camp were mostly just walking around to see all the different buildings. The camp had a lake where you could go boating and fishing, a bunch of tables for eating and doing crafts, a place to shoot arrows, a track for driving small go-karts, and a garden. There was also a hiking trail that went deep into the woods around the camp. By the fourth night, the counselors gathered all of us kids around a big campfire to tell us scary stories. Miss Keene, can you tell us how the camp got its name? One of the kids asked. The young counselor, whose name was Miss Keene, was only a few years older than my sister, and she had straight red hair tied back in a ponytail. Sure, I can tell you. The town of Sleepy Falls was started by people from Europe a long time ago in the 1500s. There was a local legend about a creature that protected the forest, called the Manatari, who would walk around the woods and kidnap anyone who walked too far inside. Nobody knows for sure if the settlers brought this legend with them or if it came from the native tribes who lived here first. Some people think it is a type of fairy. Other people think it is a ghost, she explained to us. I raised my hand in the air because I had a question I really wanted to ask. Yes, Max, is that your name? She said, pointing her finger in my direction. Why would they name the camp after a monster that kidnaps people? I asked her. I think it was to honor the creature because it was supposed to be a good guardian of the forest, she answered me. Now, do you all want to hear the scary story about the horseman from hell? She asked, and all the kids cheered loudly because they wanted to hear another scary story. I did not really pay attention to the rest of the story that night. When I went to bed, I really missed my home, my mom, Riley, and even my dad. The next few months went by in a very normal and predictable way. About 2 weeks before the camp was supposed to end, Miss Keene got really sick. She stayed inside her cabin for most of the time, and we could only see her sometimes when she looked out of her window to watch us play outside. Eventually, people just stopped noticing her being there. I asked one of the other counselors where she was. "Oh, Miss Keene? We had to take her to the hospital. She was very sick and was not getting any better," he told me. "Is she going to come back for the last day of camp?" I asked him. "No, maybe she will come back next year," he answered. "Okay, no more questions. Let's get ready for one of our last nature hikes," he added. The hike was exactly the same as all the other ones. We walked on the same path, saw the same trees, and looked at the same plants. During the walk, I slowly started to fall behind the rest of the group because I was thinking too much about what happened to Miss Keene and wondering if my dad was still mad at me now that I was going home at the end of the week. "Max?" A voice called out from behind a big tree. I stopped walking immediately and looked all around me, but I did not see anyone. "Max?" the voice said again. I recognized that voice right away. Even though I had not heard it in 3 whole weeks, it was definitely Miss Keene. "Miss Keene, is that you?" I yelled out. "Please help me. You do not have to do this." Miss Keene begged me. "Please follow me, children," she called out to me. "Hey everyone, I found Miss Keene. I think she is hurt." I yelled to the group walking far ahead of me, but they were too far away to hear me. I decided to follow the voice to find Miss Keene. If she was hurt, I could use the first aid skills I learned at one of the camp activities to help her. I chased the voice deeper into the woods, walking far away from the normal hiking trail. Before I even realized what was happening, I was completely lost. I never actually found Miss Keene. I tried to walk back the way I came as best as I could to get back to the camp. Somehow I managed to make it back. I was still being held tightly in my mother's arms, and I could feel her shoulder getting wet from my tears. I could feel the warm air from her breathing as she cried against me, and her tears were slowly soaking into my shirt. From the den down the hall, I heard a very clear popping sound, which sounded exactly like the loud noise Benny's accidental gunshot had made months ago, but it was a little bit quieter. I heard the sound of fast footsteps running down the stairs as Riley came rushing into the room. "What happened?" she cried out, stopping suddenly in the doorway when she saw me standing there. "Riley?" I asked, pulling myself away from my mom's hug. She fell down onto her hands and knees on the floor, crying even harder. "What the actual hell is going on?" she screamed, turning around and running back upstairs as fast as she could, slamming her bedroom door shut behind her. I walked over to the telephone on the wall, picked up the receiver, and listened. I could hear Riley breathing heavily and trying to stop herself from crying. 911, what is your emergency?" the operator asked. "Hello, please send help. I am at 3232 West Holly Lane," she said in a very urgent voice. "What is happening there?" the operator asked her. "It is my brother. He is downstairs with my mom, and I think my dad just shot himself," she cried. "No, that is not right. My brother disappeared a month ago at camp. They found his dead body in the woods. We buried him in the ground last week. That thing downstairs is not my brother," she screamed, her voice finally breaking into loud cries of both deep sadness and pure terror. This is the end of the first part of our scary story. Here begins the second part. 10 whole years have gone by since the last time I was at my childhood home, since the last time I walked through that big blue front door with the welcome mat on the floor. They tried to sell the house after we moved out, or rather, they were forced to try and sell it. But the house just would not sell to anyone. It was really hard to sell a house that had the bad reputation of someone killing themselves inside it. For 10 long years, I have been tortured by the memories of that terrible day. The day my dad ended his own life, the day my mom lost her mind and went crazy, and the day my brother seemed to come back from the dead. My brother, Max, had gone missing during the last few days of his summer camp trip. He had gone to Camp Minatari, which was located just outside of that creepy town called Sleepy Falls. It was one of those small, old towns that had been around since the colonial times but was not printed on any maps. You could only find it if you had been there before or if someone who knew the way led you there. When we got the phone call that Max was missing, we drove for 4 long hours to get to Camp Minatari to help look for him. My dad did not say a single word the entire drive, and neither did I. The heavy, quiet silence in the car was only broken by my mom crying sometimes and saying over and over again, "My baby boy, we will find you." When we finally got to Sleepy Falls, we drove through the market area because it was the fastest way to get to the camp. The shop owners and the people shopping all came out of their buildings to watch us drive by without saying a word. There were no smiles, no waving hands, just people staring at us. I clearly remembered visiting this town when I was much younger. Even though I was just a little kid back then, something about the town gave me a very bad and creepy feeling. When we got to the camp, we were greeted by a really tall and skinny guy with dark haircut in a bowl shape and dark glasses. "Hello, I am Simon, one of the counselors who work here. You must be the Turner family?" the tall guy said, holding out his hand to shake my dad's hand. "I am Grant. This is my wife, Nicole, and our daughter, Riley," my dad said, shaking Simon's hand very firmly. Simon looked at my mom and me before looking back at my dad. "We are doing everything we can to find Max. The local police sheriff and his 2 helpers are also helping us search," he told us. "That is it? Just the sheriff and his 2 helpers? Where are the state police? Where is the FBI?" I demanded to know. "This is my brother we are talking about. Riley, be quiet," my dad ordered me, his voice sounding very sharp and angry. I immediately stopped talking. My dad was not a man who liked to yell. He rarely got angry, so when he did get mad, it was always a big surprise. The town wants to keep this a local matter for right now. Also, all the counselors and the volunteer campers are actively helping with the search, Simon explained with a smile on his face. "We will help too," my dad declared. My mom and I nodded our heads in agreement. The search went on all through the night and into the early morning hours. We took turns working in shifts. One group would go into the woods to look for him, while the other group stayed at the camp to rest until it was their turn to search. I was in the night search group working alongside my dad and Simon. We did not find anything at all. No lost clothes, no drops of blood, no answers to our shouts. As we were walking back to the camp to switch places with the other group, the sun was just starting to shine through the trees. "Do you want some coffee?" Simon asked, holding 2 cups and offering one to me. "Sure, thank you," I said, taking the blue cup from his hand. He looked at me for a moment, like he was trying to find the right words to say. "Can I help you with something?" I asked him. "Oh, I am sorry. I did not mean to stare at you," he answered. "No, I am the one who should say sorry. That was rude of me." I sighed. Simon looked like he was only a year or 2 older than me. I guess he was worried about Max too, since he had spent the last few months hanging out with him. Maybe he had a younger brother of his own, which made him feel sorry for us. "Do you volunteer to work at this camp every year?" I asked, trying to make small talk. "Oh, actually, I live around here. I live in the town with my uncle," he answered. "Ah, I see. Tell me, is the town always this weird when people from outside visit?" I asked him. "Weird? Oh, well, we do not get a lot of visitors. So, when someone drives through, people tend to get curious," he said with a laugh. Curious? Those stares did not look curious at all. They were sending a very clear message. You do not belong here. So, if you are from this area, you must know these woods really well, right? I suggested. "Not completely. The woods change after the summer is over," he said. "What do you mean by that?" I asked him. He looked panicked as he looked back at me. "Oh, it is just a saying we use around here, like how the trees change when the seasons change. And you know, every tree looks the same," he said, laughing in a nervous way. Before I could ask him more questions, one of the sheriff's helpers came running back into the camp, breathing very hard. "We found something," he announced. My dad immediately jumped up from his chair, swaying a little bit because he was so tired, but he quickly walked over to the helpers. "Show me," he ordered. The helper nodded and led my dad into the forest. They had found my brother. He was dead. The official reason they gave for his death was that he froze to death outside in the cold. His body was found without any clothes on, lying face down in a small creek. They said this was a normal thing that happens when people get severe hypothermia. His back was cut open, showing his spine, and some of his inside organs were missing. They said this was because wild animals had eaten him. The drive back home was completely silent, even quieter than the drive to the camp. My mom did not cry. She was just in a state of total shock. I was trying so hard to hold back my feelings, feeling a huge need to cry, to throw up, and to just stop existing. I could not handle this deep, terrible pain. My dad, just like he always did, stayed completely quiet and did not show any emotion. The funeral happened a few weeks later, and they left the casket open so we could see him. The people at the funeral home did a really good job of making Max look as alive and normal as possible. I had a tiny bit of hope that he would suddenly jump up and say it was all a big joke. But he never moved, never smiled, and never laughed. I missed his laugh so much. "Hey Riley, I am so sorry for your loss," a short, chubby boy with very short hair said to me. "Oh, hi Benny. I did not recognize you at first. Did you get a haircut?" I asked him. "Yeah, my mom made me get it cut because she said my hair was not the right length for a funeral," he explained, rubbing his hand over his short hair. "I made a big mistake." Benny started to cry. "If I had not been in summer school, I could have been there at camp with Max. I could have watched his back and made sure he was safe," he sobbed. I hugged him, pulling him close to try and comfort him, patting his back to make him feel safe. As I did that, I felt something hard press against my leg. "Ooh, Benny, what the heck is that?" I said, pushing him away from me. "Sorry, I have never been hugged by a girl before. Not one who was not my mom," he confessed, wiping the tears away from his face. "It is okay," I told him. When we got back home, my dad went straight into his den and locked the door, while my mom started cooking all of Max's favorite foods and cleaning the kitchen over and over again. A whole week went by. My dad stayed locked in his den, eating his meals in there and only coming out to use the bathroom and take a quick shower. My mom slept in Max's room on his bed, saying it still smelled like him. I could hear her crying at night, muffled by his pillow and the wall of my bedroom. There were nights when I really wanted to sneak out of the house, but I could never force myself to actually leave. One morning, I was in my room, listening to music and looking at the posters stuck to my ceiling. Suddenly, I heard a loud popping sound from downstairs. I jumped up immediately and ran out of my room, rushing down the stairs. What the hell just happened? I screamed as I walked into the kitchen. What I saw in there was impossible to explain. It was my brother, or something that looked exactly like him, being hugged by my mom. It looked like Max, but something about it was just slightly wrong and creepy. Its skin was hanging off its body in a loose way, kind of like an old, torn bedsheet draped over a coat rack. It was not Max, not the one we had buried in the ground, but some fake copy trying to pretend to be him. "What the hell?" I shrieked, turning around and running back upstairs as fast as I could, slamming my bedroom door shut. I looked at my bed and saw the wireless phone lying there. I grabbed it instantly and dialed 911. Between the rings, I heard a faint clicking sound, a noise I knew very well from when Max used to listen in on my phone calls with my friends. It was listening to us. 911, what is your emergency?" the operator asked. "Hello, please send help. I am at 3232 West Holly Lane," I said in a very urgent voice. "What is happening there?" the operator asked me. "It is my brother. He is downstairs with my mom, and I think my dad just shot himself." I cried. "No, that is not right. My brother disappeared a month ago at summer camp. They found his dead body in the woods, and we buried him last week. That thing downstairs is not my brother," I screamed, losing control and crying uncontrollably. "Ma'am, could you say that again? Is this a prank call?" the operator asked on the phone. "Help, there is a stranger in my house. I am in danger, and my mom is in danger too. He shot my dad. Help," I cried, hanging up the phone and hoping really hard that they would believe me and take me seriously. I had to find a way to escape to save Mom, I thought to myself. Just then, I heard a knocking on my door. "Riley, let me in. Let's watch cartoons together." A voice called from the other side of my door. I started to quickly but quietly slide my window open to the outside. "Riley, Mom made pancakes. Come on down," the voice said again. It sounded like Max, but not completely like him. It was like someone was trying to copy Max's voice and the way he talked, but they were just failing to get it perfectly right. I started to climb down. I had climbed out this window many times before, but always when I had plenty of time to be careful. I was about halfway down when I heard the loud sound of something smashing into my upstairs door. The wood groaned and broke apart with each hard hit. I did not have hours to carefully climb down anymore. I was forced to jump the rest of the way. It was probably another 10 feet down, but the thought of twisting my ankle or getting worse hurt made me do it. I was aiming to land in the thick bushes below. The landing was not very graceful, but the biggest injuries I got were just some scratches from the thorns and branches. Going back through the front door to get my mom was completely impossible. My first priority was to get a weapon. The window to my dad's study was my only way to get back inside. It was a very tight space, but I managed to squeeze my body through it. My dad was slumped down in his chair, his mouth hanging open. A terrible mess of bone and brain tissue was on the back of his head. His favorite 1911 pistol was lying on the floor next to him. Scattered all over the den were plates with half-eaten food and a lot of crumpled-up pieces of paper. When I looked closer, I realized these were suicide notes. My dad had been thinking about killing himself for days. It seemed like seeing that gross monster wearing my brother's face was the final thing that pushed him over the edge. I thought about taking the 1911 pistol, but I did not really know how to use it. The shotgun, however, which was in the now unlocked gun cabinet, was something I knew how to use very well. My dad had taught me how to shoot it, even though it always left my shoulder bruised. He insisted it was the best option for protecting the house. I carefully loaded 3 shells of buckshot into the tube, then 2 solid slugs, and then 1 final round into the chamber. I grabbed a handful of extra shells and stuffed them into the front pocket of the flannel shirt I was wearing. I opened the door to the hallway very slowly, walking past my parents' bedroom and the kitchen. I found my mom still on the floor, crying into the tiles. "Mom," I whispered, "you have to run away." She did not answer me, just stood up and brushed herself off. "Oh, hello, Riley. I was just about to make some pancakes for your brother. Please tell him to wash his hands," she said with a smile on her lips, but her eyes were completely empty and had no emotion in them at all. "Unbelievable," I whispered to myself. The noises from upstairs got louder. I held the shotgun tight against my shoulder, waiting for the monster to suddenly appear at the top of the stairs. But it never showed up. I checked my room. The door had been broken open, but the monster was nowhere to be found. I then searched my brother's room, just in case this thing was polite enough to close doors behind itself. Still nothing, just my brother's unmade bed, exactly how my mom had left it. It was then that the television downstairs turned on at a super loud volume. I quickly turned around, heading back downstairs, past the kitchen where my mom was still standing completely frozen in the exact same spot. She was holding a whisk, moving her hand in circles like she was stirring something, but there was nothing in the bowl. Walking into the living room, I saw the monster sitting on the couch watching cartoons. I raised the shotgun, aiming it at the back of what you could call its head, with my finger resting right on the trigger. "Is it time for cartoons?" it asked, its voice sounding like a creepy copy of Max's voice. I hesitated for a second. Its head turned around super fast, just like an owl, and it looked at me with eyes that were completely black, like pitch. The sight reminded me of a dead deer's empty eyes after it had been killed. The freezing feeling of it being so close sent a shock of ice through my blood. Startled by how it looked, I pulled the trigger and fired the shotgun, a solid slug hitting the top part of its head. A terrible shriek came out of it as it jumped off the couch, launching itself up towards the ceiling and then started crawling on the ceiling like a giant spider. Its arms and legs were twisted and knotted like old tree branches, and its body was bending and twisting like a rag being wrung out really hard. I adjusted where I was aiming upwards, and as it crawled directly above me, I shot it right in the middle of its body this time. This huge, heavy body crashed down on top of me, pinning me to the floor. The shotgun was ripped out of my hands, falling just out of my reach. A dark, sticky liquid, looking like tree sap, started to leak out of its mouth and the hole in its chest. The smell was disgusting, like rotting food mixed with dirty, old water. The creature was incredibly heavy, like a whole fallen tree had landed on top of me. I struggled and clawed at the floor to get out from under its crushing weight. Just as I was about to break free, it grabbed my ankle. Big, twisted fingers started to grow out of its hand, wrapping around my leg. I could see the top of its head where I had shot it earlier. It was pulsing and beating like a heart, with lines in it that looked like wood grain. It looked up at me as its face started to change and split open, showing rows of sharp, bony teeth lining a mouth that opened up and down instead of side to side. I twisted my body, spotting the shotgun right behind me. I stretched my arm out, trying to reach it, but my fingertips could only barely touch it. The creature's mouth opened even wider as its tentacles pulled tighter, wrapping all the way up to my thigh, just below the bottom of my shorts. Taking a deep, ragged breath, I pulled backward with all the strength I had in my body, throwing myself further away. The skin on my thigh tore and peeled off where the creature was holding on to me. I grabbed the shotgun, dragging it towards me. I pumped the next shell into the chamber, ejecting the empty shell with a loud clatter across the carpet. I raised the weapon towards the creature's exposed face, and in that exact second, a flood of memories about Max rushed into my brain. I could not tell if these were my real memories or a fake trick made by the monster to confuse me. I refused to be stopped. Without waiting even a second, I pulled the trigger. The buckshot hit its exposed face from point-blank range, making it pull back in pain, its howl being a deafeningly loud scream. I pumped another shell, getting ready to give it the final blow. It suddenly let go of my leg with its tentacles and crashed right through the big living room window, escaping to the outside. A few moments later, the loud wail of police sirens got closer, coming down our street. There was no logical explanation for the terrible things that had happened that day. The police would have just laughed at my story and thought I was crazy. They blamed everything on a teenager having a mental breakdown, caused by the recent tragedies of my brother dying and my dad killing himself. My mom never got better from the shock, and they eventually had to put her in a special care home for people who need help. I was supposed to graduate that year and start college in the fall. Instead, I had to go through a lot of tests by doctors. They diagnosed me with post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and probably bipolar disorder. They said I might be a danger to myself. Even though they said that, I never told them the real truth about what actually happened. The thought of ending up crazy like my mom was too much to bear. I still go to visit her regularly. She knows who I am, but she always says the exact same thing to me. Tell your brother to wash his hands for breakfast. So why am I here, back in this house, this rotting building full of memories? A part of me hopes that the monster still lives here. The other reason is that when the police arrived, I hid the shotgun under a loose floorboard, a secret hiding spot I had known about for a long time. I could buy any gun I might need for my upcoming task, but this specific weapon has a special personal meaning to me. I still do not know what the creature is, the monster that took my brother's life and stole his body. Years of researching has led me to read many stories about shapeshifters, skinwalkers, and similar magical creatures from old legends. What I do know is that it came from the forest next to Sleepy Falls, a town that has always given me a bad feeling. I understood back then that it was time to go back. Therefore, I needed to find out the second part of this story, which was an amazing story where you actually get to experience two completely different points of view. Like, you get to see things from the child's perspective, and then you actually get three perspectives. You get the skinwalkers, or whatever it was, perspective, and you get the sister's perspective across about 10 years. That was a truly amazing story. All right, let's move on to the next one. The next story we have today comes from the r/nosleep subreddit, submitted by a user named Trash_Tia. Our third grade teacher told us to play a game and said the words, "Simon says stop." So we all stopped moving and doing anything. Miss Carrington's smile disappeared from her face. just like the smiles of all the other teachers who had taught us before her. I had been waiting for her to finally break down and lose her temper too. Mr. Garrett had run away screaming. Miss Pepper was arrested for trying to poison us, and Mr. Johnstone wrote about us in his suicide note. He did not actually die, but he did purposely fall down the stairs on purpose. We were really mean and cruel. Well, my class was really mean. I rarely talked, but if the rest of the group was laughing, I laughed too. If I did not join in with their laughing, they would stare at me like I was stupid. I am not sure why our main goal was to try and destroy our teachers. Miss Carrington was a very nice person. I liked her bright smile and her pretty dresses. However, the other students really wanted to show that they were the boss of her and could control her. Serena Ackerman strongly claimed that she had seen Miss Carrington doing magic spells. Her reason was that Miss Carrington looked unusually weird while talking to a third grader, with her eyes closed tight. I was totally convinced Miss Carrington was just about to sneeze, but I was told to shut up very loudly. After that, my classmates started calling her a witch, throwing things at her, refusing to do their schoolwork, and even making up fake stories about her hitting them. Miss Carrington's happy and sunny mood started to get dark and sad. I carefully wrote down in my notebook every time her voice shook, her hands turning into tight fists when Rowan asked her about her hair, and then asking if she had a boyfriend. The boys sitting in the back rows used her as a target, throwing crumpled up paper at her face, followed by pens, pencils, and even a plastic water bottle, which almost left a bruise on her. I watched the happy light in her eyes slowly fading away. The eager shine that used to show her passion for teaching completely disappeared. Miss Carrington arrived in class looking like she had been crying a lot. She kept tissues in her pocket to wipe her eyes when Jack threw his workbook at her, and she eventually started teaching with her back turned to the class, just to avoid getting hit by flying school supplies. After days and then weeks of waiting patiently for Miss Carrington to give up, our teacher finally lost her control on a random Tuesday, while it was raining heavily outside. She was writing a poem on the board when Summer Carlyle stood up from her desk. Summer had been bullying me for weeks because I did not get any nice skincare products for Christmas. There was a princess-themed facial foam that all the kids were talking about, and even I really wanted to have it. I asked my mom if we could go to the Sephora store to look at the makeup, but as I walked straight to the skincare section, Mom's smile started to look weird and twisted. I did ask for the facial foam, but Mom laughed at me. "For what skin, Ruby? You are only 9 years old," she said. Mom picked up the product. "Do you even understand what it is used for?" I knew exactly what Summer Carlyle was doing a few yards away, watching me. The girl had eyes like a hawk, and I knew she would notice me looking at it. "No," I mumbled quietly. "It is for wrinkles on your face," Mom laughed. She gently held my face in her hands, her smile making my stomach feel weird and uneasy. "It is a serum to make you look younger." "Do you want to look younger?" I blinked my eyes. "But all the other kids want to look younger?" She teased me. "I thought you wanted to look like a grown-up." "Summer says I always look like a baby," I told her. Mom put the foam back on the shelf and instead guided me towards the makeup section. She bought some eyeshadow for me, and when I kept asking because Summer was definitely staring at me, she even bought me the other item, a thick paste-like cream or something similar to that. The adult orange cream that grown-ups put on their faces to hide wrinkles. Summer had bought 3 bottles of the foam and made sure to show them off to everyone else. If you did not have it, you were not considered cool or fashionable. I showed her my adult makeup, and she laughed at it, saying, "Well, my Grammy wears that stuff, so you are wearing old people's makeup." That day, Summer Carlyle was determined to make our teacher cry. "Miss Carrington," Summer teased, leaning forward in her desk. "How old are you again?" Our teacher's bottom lip started to shake. "I am 31 years old," she said. "Ew." Summer made a disgusted face. "Isn't 30 incredibly old?" "That is still young," Miss Carrington replied with a tired sigh. "I do not think you children really understand how aging works." "What is that supposed to mean?" Summer snapped angrily. "Aging is a beautiful thing," Miss Carrington stated. "I lost my mother when I was very young, and I would give anything to see her wrinkles and watch her age gracefully. You should be thankful and grateful for your wrinkled skin. Be thankful you have lived all those years." She let out a small giggle. "Did your mother look like a grandmother as well?" I clearly remember the exact second when our teacher started to break. She stopped writing, and her fingers squeezed the pen really hard. "Summer Carlyle," her voice shook a little bit. "If you do not stop being so rude, I will be calling your mother." 30 is old and ugly," Rowan Adam interrupted with a snort. As I turned around, the boy was practically shaking in his chair, wanting so badly to start a fight. His eyes were squinted, and his lips were curled into a mean smirk. "I can see your ugly wrinkles, Miss Carrington," he said. Miss Carrington stopped writing as the whole class erupted into loud laughter. She turned around, and I saw her mouth finally curve into a real, genuine smile. I had missed her real smile. I was used to seeing her fake smiles after she had definitely cried in the bathroom, but this one looked completely real. Sitting up straight in my seat, I crossed out my latest tally mark. Maybe she was not going to quit after all. Miss Carrington's lips parted into one of her old, happy smiles, her eyes shining brightly. "I have an idea. Why don't we play a game of Simon Says?" She stepped forward, and her dark eyes looked at every single one of us in the room. I felt the air around me become completely still, and my pencil slipped out of my hand and fell. Miss Carrington's voice suddenly echoed loudly inside my head, piercing through my skull and churning my brain into mush. It was intensely loud, so loud that it made a screeching noise come out of the back of my throat. "Simon Says clap your hands," she instructed us. We all did it. My body moved completely on its own, without me telling it to, and my hands slapped together with a loud clapping sound. Miss Carrington nodded, a smile on her face. "Very good. Simon Says jump up and down," she said. It was painful. The feeling of my body being violently thrown upwards ripped me out of my seat. I jumped 3 times, making a loud cacophony of feet hitting the floor. "Simon Says sit down," she commanded. I slumped back into my chair, tears filling my eyes, yet I could not even blink them away. Miss Carrington folded her arms across her chest, her eyes shining. "Simon Says stop," she said. We all complied. We stopped. I could feel the breath inside my lungs. I was still breathing, still alive, still conscious and watching my teacher. However, I had stopped moving. I assumed it was just a joke. But Miss Carrington did not follow it up with "Simon Says go." I waited for her to give the next command, choking on that lingering, frozen breath in my chest. Yet she did not end the game. I remained completely motionless for hours. The room grew dark, and I was aware of every single second passing by, every single painful minute. I counted minutes, then hours, until I lost track of time. Days went by. I felt each and every single one of them. Tuesday turned into Wednesday, then Thursday and Friday. The weekend arrived, and I was totally sure the game would finally end. But then, another Monday dawned. Another Tuesday came, and I found myself disconnecting from reality, my fists slamming against an invisible barrier inside my mind. I was completely incapable of moving. My body refused to obey my brain. I remained seated, my gaze fixed upon the whiteboard with an unchanging expression. Wednesday arrived, and I clung to every agonizing second. "Simon Says go." I willed the words into existence, trying so hard to move my frozen lips. "Simon Says go. Simon." Eventually, weeks began to feel like years. Monday became Wednesday, and then it was the year 2017. Sunday felt like a Friday, and Saturday encompassed the entirety of 2018. My only comfort was observing the changing seasons out of the corner of my vision. It was my only indication that the world continued to exist without me while I remained frozen in place. Years passed, feeling like centuries, and I was still playing Simon Says. I was perpetually present, my body perpetually fixed to my seat within my 3rd grade classroom. I meticulously counted every ceiling tile, every poster adorning the walls, every fragment of light. Rain lashed against the windows. The sun beat down on the back of my neck. The wind sent prickles down my spine. I was aware of my hair growing longer, then shorter, and then tied into a ponytail. It was as if an invisible version of me was continuing onward while I remained frozen. I grew taller and my face began to change. I sensed my body twisting and contorting as if being stretched. Pain surged in waves, striking my legs repeatedly, followed by a different agony in my stomach. This sensation made me wish for death. I couldn't halt it. I couldn't control this monstrous entity that assaulted me every Wednesday in July 2019. I experienced emotions, new ones that I couldn't comprehend. I felt anger and frustration, pain and sadness, a profound longing, butterflies fluttering in my chest and stomach that never subsided. But then, a warmth enveloped me, a blooming within my heart that felt like warm water washing over me. Heartbreak felt like suffocation. Emotions served as windows into my existence. I was discovering love, falling in love, and then out of love. But it felt profoundly unjust that I couldn't witness these experiences. I merely felt them. Love, however, didn't make sense to me. Boys and girls were inherently unpleasant. Then, I ceased counting the Wednesdays in July of 2018. My focus shifted to our frozen classroom. I could perceive the other children, but I was certain they had been replaced. Summer no longer resembled a 9-year-old. Her face was noticeably blotchy. Rowan appeared like my older brother, his head nearly brushing the ceiling. I cannot recall when I ceased screaming, when I stopped pounding against the barrier within my mind, desperately pleading for death, for release from Simon Says. I believe I chose to stop myself. My teacher had physically immobilized me, and I opted for sleep. I no longer wished to count the Saturday Mondays. I desired to cease thinking, so I decided to drift into slumber. Miss Carrington's voice finally resonated. Simon Says go. Several thousand Saturdays later, the game concluded. Like a wave of icy water washing over me, my breath returned. Simon Says go. Blinking rapidly, my consciousness reconnected with my body. My senses were restored. Taste, bubblegum, smell, perfume. My vision was initially hazy before clarity dawned. No longer in my third-grade classroom, I stood on a stage, a graduation gown pooling at my feet. I wore a beautiful dress that shouldn't have fit me, a garment intended for an adult. The individuals beside me were strangers, intimidating high school students. So why was I standing with them? I felt my legs give way, only to catch myself, a cry catching in my throat. The room was filled with people all smiling mid-applause. In my hand, I held a rolled-up piece of paper. A banner affixed to the wall captured my attention. Congratulations to our class of 2023. 2023? No, it was 2016. I had only experienced 2018, 2019, and the subsequent year. How could it be 2023? 2023 was an impossibly large number. I was 9 years old in the third grade. I could see my mother in the audience, her smile wide. I didn't recall my mother having wrinkles. The last time I had seen her, my mother's face was still smooth and youthful. Now I could clearly see lines etched into her features. Her hair was thinner, pulled back into a ponytail, a far cry from her usual lovely curls. Something viscous filled the back of my throat. The adults beside me were not strangers. They were my classmates. As the applause subsided, my classmates seemed to snap out of their trance, each released from Simon Says. Rowan Adams, standing beside me, blinked, his eyes widening. His diploma slipped from his grasp. His gaze became vacant, frenzied. He whispered, What's happening?" Summer Carlyle began to shriek, her agonizing cry reverberating in my skull. She clawed at her face with her manicured nails, with enough force to draw blood, pieces of flesh clinging between her scarlet fingertips. Jack stumbled backward, tripping over himself. The terror that held me paralyzed snapped when Olivia Lewis let out a choking sound. She trembled, her eyes rolling back into her head. Something slipped from her mouth, a red, bulging mass. It was her tongue. I had never witnessed so much blood seeping down her chin. The audience began to murmur as she giggled, sputtering, pooling red. "Mom!" I could hear the word in heavy breaths and sharp hisses. Summer shrieked, attempting to tear at her hair. Rowan regarded the crowd with a cocked head. "Where's my mom at?" he whispered. For a moment, silence prevailed, save for the attempts of several adults to calm Summer. I could hear the labored, sobbing breaths of my classmates. Then the screams began. Children started hurling themselves off the stage, discarding their graduation gowns, overcome by hysterics. In the reflection of someone's phone, I saw myself an adult. I was taller, my hair cascading loosely down my shoulders. But all the years that had led to this moment, my preteen and teenage years, were gone. I dropped my diploma, attempting to walk, but my body felt alien. It was too large and too heavy. My voice remained small, undeniably mine. Yet my body, my mind, my thoughts were all significantly older. I pulled off my graduation cap, my eyes welling with tears. I found my mom in the throng, wrapping my arms around her. She clutched me tightly, her eyes fixed on the clamoring multitude of children bestowing their parents with assault hugs. I was trembling, clinging to my mother to ensure she was real. Mom had the same familiar scent, but when I released my embrace, her face was a tapestry of wrinkles. Summer Carlyle had thoroughly schooled me on the signs of a woman's age. Mom's mouth bore them, and they creased her cheeks. I couldn't resist gently prodding them. Words caught in my throat. She wasn't supposed to look this aged. Why did my mother appear so elderly? "Mom," I choked out, stifling sobs. "I'm old." Mom seemed rattled by the surrounding chaos, her grip on me tightening. "Ruby, is something amiss?" "Miss Carrington," I began to say. Behind me, Summer Carlyle shrieked, her eyes wide like a cornered animal. Miss Carrington's voice seeped into our minds, immobilizing us once more. "Have you learned your lesson?" "Yes," I thought, feeling dizzy. I sensed that exact word reverberating through our shared consciousness. "Yes." "Very well," she purred. "Misbehave again, and I will make you regret your very existence. You never, and I mean never, inquire about a woman's age." She released us, and I recall collapsing to my knees, my fingernails gouging my own face. The world felt unreal. I had to grip the floor to confirm I wasn't still glued to my seat, trapped within the confines of my third-grade classroom. Mom's murmurs filled my ear, but I couldn't process them. All I could hear was Miss Carrington. Since completing my education, I have sought counsel from 3 different therapists. I bit them all. They were utterly incompetent. They dismissed my accounts of Miss Carrington, treating me as a mature individual. In their estimation, I was merely experiencing stress. I divulged everything. Every day, every week, every month I endured. All the years spent meticulously counting floor tiles. Frozen, screaming. They presented me with footage from those periods. They showed me celebrating my 10th birthday, then my 12th, and entering my teenage years. However, I have no recollection of these milestones. That girl was a stranger. She was an empty vessel bearing my visage. While I suffered, I made efforts to connect with the other children. Summer is now in a psychiatric facility, and Rowan attempted to take his own life. Jack, remarkably, attended university, and Serena has secured gainful employment. I'm unsure if she truly grasps her responsibilities, but she persists. I cannot fault Rowan for wanting to escape it all. I too wish for oblivion. I possess a decade's worth of knowledge that induces a pounding headache. I understand mathematical formulas but lack the memory of learning them. I can compose and spell correctly, yet I have no recollection of acquiring these skills. I live in perpetual fear of Miss Carrington resuming her Simon Says games. Occasionally, she compels us to play. These episodes are brief, lasting only a night or a few hours. I awaken with soiled hands in the middle of the city or in the home of a stranger. Just 2 weeks ago, I found myself submerged in a swimming pool. Subsequently, I was in a tunnel located in the heart of town. Last night, I discovered a substantial sum of cash in my backpack, nearly $2,000. There were also large bags filled with a white powder, the nature of which eludes me. Rowan has messaged me, requesting a meeting. He suspects Miss Carrington is exploiting us. But for what purpose? The Simon Says sessions are short-lived, and I am paralyzed by the fear of defying her. What if she incapacitates me again? I believe Rowan is being foolish, yet I desire to converse with another classmate. I encountered him last night beneath the town's bridge. He too possessed bags of the white powder. We disposed of them in the lake, then proceeded to the park for recreation. Last night, I stood before a mirror, prodding at my 18-year-old face. A minuscule wrinkle beneath my lips signifies aging, a process I have not even earned. Truly, that was profoundly unsettling. It undeniably unnerved me, and I will forever associate the game of Simon Says with a sense of dread. Now, let us transition to the subsequent narrative. This account originates from the r/Scary Stories subreddit, contributed by the user _the_mokro_. My father was a police detective, and he was spending all his time trying to figure out where all the missing children in the city of Omaha had gone. After he passed away, I found his body camera recordings. In the final moments before my dad died and passed away from this world, he grabbed my arm so hard that his fingernails actually dug into my skin, and he said some words that still give me nightmares to this day. At that time, I thought it was just the cancer finally destroying his brain and making him crazy. Now, I understand that was not the case at all. I watched as the life and energy completely drained from my father's eyes. The hospital machines made a final series of beeping sounds before falling into absolute, dead silence. His chest expanded and contracted one last time. His dark, hollowed eyes fixed upon mine before he departed this world. Even in death, his expression remained one of pure fear. There in the darkness, I remained seated, utterly alone, hoping my mother would answer my call. My father, Jim Simmons, had no other relatives, no one to rely on. The infrequent encounters I had with him during my upbringing were far from pleasant. He always appeared preoccupied, as if he were never truly present in the conversation. His gaze had a tendency to drift toward the floor mid-sentence, as if he were listening to something emanating from beneath. I suppose I should not have been surprised. My mother had stated he experienced a mental breakdown and was no longer safe to be around. Back then, it took him weeks to even acknowledge our absence. There were days he would confine himself to his office, remaining unseen until the following morning. While I may not have known him intimately, and I harbored a degree of apprehension towards him, I still felt a sense of care. To witness someone perish in such a manner is a fate I would wish upon no one. His final dying moments were steeped in a terror I could not yet comprehend. His words echoed relentlessly in the recesses of my mind. None of it made sense, at least not then. Reflecting on it now, I wish he had never uttered them. To have passed in silence would have been preferable. Before death claimed him and ushered him from this world to the next, he looked at me with a mixture of fear and anger. His lips quivered as the words escaped his mouth. I can hear them. They are still down there. All those lights. The void. I tried. A single tear traced a path down his cheek. The cardiac monitors beeping intensified. I truly tried. I am sorry. I am afraid. I am afraid I will. His final exhalation escaped his lips, his gaze still fixed on mine. He was deranged, Alex. My mother scoffed over the phone. Look, whatever he did or whatever he said, just let it go. It's irrelevant now and has no bearing on you. What about his apartment? I inquired. I stepped outside the hospital and gazed up at the celestial expanse. It was 1 o'clock in the morning, and I could discern that my mother was not asleep. She had previously ignored my calls. What about it? She snapped. Well, perhaps there is something there that might illuminate his pronouncements. He gave me his keys. He gave you his keys? Her tone was laced with irritation. What else was he supposed to do? Allow the apartment complex to claim his belongings? I suppose that compensates for all the years you weren't his father. I rolled my eyes, as if you didn't abandon him for all these years. You never granted him an opportunity for redemption before his demise. Nevertheless, she had a valid point, but none of that held significance now. She continued, I dislike the fact that he reappeared in your life without consulting me first. You deserved a better father, Alex. As if you would have listened to him? I offered him ample opportunities. He shattered our family with his absurd obsessions. It drove him to madness. I could hear her breathing heavily now. She was furious, and perhaps justifiably so. What obsessions? What drove him mad? Mom, every time I ask, you turn a blind eye and offer no response. What was it about him that terrified you so? I waited, watching an ambulance with flashing lights speed away. Mom, I wasn't afraid of him, Alex. Mom, how many times have you relocated us across the country to escape him? Do you truly believe that would have been effective? He was a detective, for heaven's sake. What do you want, Alex? It's getting late. I can't even contemplate sleeping tonight. Not with that look on his face. Not after what he said. So I confessed. You keep your secrets then. I am going to investigate. See what's there. This late? No. You remain put and get some rest first. We will discuss it further tomorrow. I want to be present when you go. Okay? I replied, biting my lower lip, fully aware that if she genuinely intended to accompany me, she would take her leisurely time. Alex, promise me you won't go over there tonight. You need the rest. Okay. I promise, Mom. I lied. Without another word, I terminated the call. I opened my right hand and looked down at the metallic gleam in my palm. He had entrusted me with the key to his apartment. There was absolutely no way I could sleep tonight. The apartment door creaked open with such vehemence that I feared I had disturbed every neighbor on the ground floor. I stepped inside and gently closed the door behind me. A shiver traced its way up my arms and across my skin. I was not alone. Something resided there. Something had been awaiting my arrival all this time. A pang of guilt settled in the pit of my stomach for arriving so soon and deceiving my mother. Like an eager child anticipating Christmas morning, everything within these walls now belonged to me. No one else desired it or had any right to claim it. I doubted my mother would have wanted any part of this. The truth, however, was that I had no interest in his possessions. Certainly, perhaps someday I could utilize or sell them, but that was not my purpose for being here. I sought to comprehend what had instilled such profound fear in my father. What burden of guilt did he carry until his dying breath? Only 2 hours had elapsed since his passing, and upon observing his solitary recliner in the living room, with no other seating to accommodate company, I regretted not endeavoring more diligently to know him after so many years under my mother's influence. In the living room, stacks of books and papers were scattered throughout the space. The air was stale. When I activated the living room lights, 3 out of the 4 bulbs in the primary fixture were extinguished. It was too dim to discern anything clearly. Consequently, I retrieved my cell phone, switched on its flashlight, and commenced my search for any indicators that might guide me. The first anomaly I encountered was on the living room wall behind the recliner. I moved closer to examine it, momentarily disregarding the sounds of the upstairs neighbor shuffling about above me. In both large and small lettering, my father had inscribed words and sentences across the entire wall with black ink. All these lights, all these rooms, they followed it. We followed them. Don't go into the tunnels. Don't go. Do not go. Do go now. I stumbled backward. There were sketches that resembled pipes and boxes, an overwhelming number of them. I traced this pattern, which led directly to the ceiling, and I gasped. The entire ceiling was covered in black scribbles. More of the same words. There, in the center of the room, etched into the ceiling, presumably with a knife. Do you hear them? I shook my head, feeling a wave of nausea. Perhaps I should not have come here not so soon. My father's words still resonated in my mind. I am sorry. I was afraid. I was in a room that had once belonged to a madman. I felt ill. I made my way directly to the door, seeking fresh air, but a pulsating blue light emanating from another room caught my attention. I crept towards the partially ajar door and pushed it open. Inside, a computer and monitor hummed through the night. The screen flickered intermittently. A blue screensaver displayed what appeared to be a blueprint. I entered the room and flipped the light switch. Nothing happened. Had he truly lived in such conditions? For how long? I raised my phone's light, illuminating the small desk room. I pulled out his rolling desk chair and sat down. The screensaver depicted a blueprint of the subterranean tunnel systems beneath the city of Omaha. Then my gaze drifted to my right. A dusty newspaper lay on the desk. I lifted it, dust scattering into the air as I brought it closer to read the date and title. April 20th, 2010. 9 children missing. On the front page of the Omaha City News were small photographs of each child who had disappeared. Their faces smiling, likely from a school yearbook. All of them were 8th graders. As I examined each image, the hairs on the back of my neck prickled. A floorboard creaked behind me. I spun around abruptly, half expecting to find my deceased father standing directly behind me, his terrified, sunken eyes gazing down. No one was there. A white label on a shelf behind me drew my attention. I removed it from the shelf and examined it. It was a DVD case containing a single disc. The label was inscribed with a black Sharpie. Body cam footage, April 2010. Without hesitation, I opened the case and inserted the disc into his PC. A lock screen greeted me. Irritated, I surveyed his stacks of papers and sticky notes. There was no indication of his password. I sat there, contemplating how long I would remain and how much more I could endure of this palpable presence hovering behind me. My initial attempt was rudimentary. Admin and admin, all in uppercase. Neither attempt was successful. I buried my face in my sweaty palms and sighed. I didn't know him well enough, and I certainly wasn't adept with computers. So, I tried my mother's name, doubting its efficacy with each keystroke. No luck. Finally, I entered my own name and, to my surprise, I was granted access. Great, another layer to this guilt. My heart pounded as I hovered over the disk icon, remaining still in the quiet darkness. The screen's luminescence cast a reddish hue upon my eyes. For video files awaited my selection. I initiated the first one and amplified the volume. Body cam footage 1. The video commenced with a burst of static before the image slowly resolved. There he was, a younger iteration of my father, staring back at me as he adjusted the body camera's lens. He appeared healthy and vibrant, a man I barely recognized. The camera jolted as he exited the vehicle. It was 5:17 p.m. The sun shone brightly, making it difficult to see as he proceeded towards what appeared to be a vast parking garage ahead. My eyes darted back and forth, awaiting the unfolding events. As he entered the parking garage, he was met by a police officer. "Hey, Jim," the officer said. He was overweight and clearly out of breath as he spoke. "What have you got for me today, Hopper?" My father inquired as they walked towards what seemed to be 2 children waiting further inside. Hopper shook his head and wiped the sweat from his brow. Several kids, 9 of them to be precise, 8th graders. They've been missing since this morning. None of them attended school. Their parents are beside themselves with worry. There's a pair up ahead whom we've been questioning. I believe you'll want to speak with them. Wonderful, Simmons stated. Another colossal waste of my time. So, they skipped school and are now afraid of facing the repercussions at home. Perhaps, Hopper hesitated, scratching the back of his neck. To be completely candid with you, though, I don't believe that's the case. Not these particular children. They then caught up with the 2 boys waiting for them. Both appeared visibly nervous and uneasy. "I'm Detective Simmons," my father announced to them. He then shifted his attention to the boy on the left. "Let's begin with you, son. What's your name?" "Adam," he replied, his voice trembling. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Adam. Would you care to tell me what's transpiring?" Adam attempted to speak, but his nerves got the better of him. The other boy interjected. "They went down there. And your name is?" my father asked, his voice calm and mostly gentle. "Kevin. Down where? Kevin?" Kevin turned and gestured towards a maintenance door. "Through there." "Was the door secured when they attempted to enter, Kevin?" Kevin shook his head. "No." "Did you observe them go?" He nodded affirmatively. "They tried to make us go too, but I refused." "And why did they wish to venture down there?" my father inquired. The rooms. The sewers. Hopper interjected. Kevin and Adam both shook their heads. Kevin elaborated. They wanted to see the rooms. The children at school talk about it constantly. Have other children been entering the sewers? Hopper questioned. I'm uncertain. They speak as if they have, but I'm not entirely convinced. Adam finally added, Billy told them about it. You're not referring to the homeless gentleman who typically frequents this garage, are you? Hopper remarked. Both teenagers nodded. Hopper turned to Simmons. They're talking about Billy Costigan. I'm sure you've encountered him before. He grinned. Simmons rolled his eyes. That addict, always concocting new schemes to stir up trouble. It doesn't surprise me in the least that he's taken up residence in the sewers. That's practically a luxury for him, Hopper chuckled. Simmons turned back to the boys, who stood there with palpable nervousness. Neither met his gaze. You witnessed the children follow him through that door? Both nodded. Adam responded, his voice quivering. We watched them descend. He claimed he discovered something. Just like that? They followed the junkie into the sewers? Hopper queried. I suppose so, Kevin replied. The footage concluded. I leaned back in the chair and rubbed my eyes, nearly missing the beginning of the subsequent scene. I glanced to my right and noticed I was still on the initial tape. Both my father and Hopper were now descending a circular metal staircase, their feet clattering against the metal steps. Periodically, they passed a light bulb affixed to the concrete wall. The stairs seemed to stretch on endlessly. I could discern their voices, but the cacophony of their footsteps made their words unintelligible. Upon reaching the bottom, voices could be heard on the other side of a large metal door. Hopper opened the door, and they entered what appeared to be a sizable tunnel. There, standing on a platform, were several more men in distinct uniforms, along with what seemed to be a small fire crew. All were wearing hard hats. One of the men in a blue hard hat spoke to Hopper first. I can hear them, but it doesn't make any sense. The men gathered around a large wooden table displaying a blueprint. My father cleared his throat. Where do you surmise the children are presently located? One of the firemen moved closer and pointed to the map for my father. This area right here. Now, if you look over here about a block away, that's our current position. We can hear the children conversing, whispering amongst themselves. I believe they are still attempting to evade us. Take me there, Jim requested. The fireman nodded, stepped away from the table and blueprint. The entire group followed him down the tunnel. They rounded a bend and eventually arrived at a new opening constructed directly into the side of another large tunnel. Within it were several vertical pipes on the left, and on the right, a single small pipe protruding from the wall. 3 other men were already inside, engaged in conversation. The space was no larger than a bedroom. The fireman paused, then indicated the horizontal pipe extending from the right side of the wall. If you listen, you can hear them through that pipe. My father knelt down and leaned in, the camera shifting slightly. I could no longer see the pipe itself, but the angle was such that I could observe the other men standing in the room with him, their faces a mixture of helplessness and confusion. The first sound I registered from the recording was giggling, a child's giggle. Then, a young voice commanded someone to return something. My father moved closer to the 8-inch diameter pipe. Hello? Can anyone hear me? The children's giggles and laughter persisted. Occasionally, sounds that resembled words were uttered, but nothing was clear enough to discern. Simmons retrieved his metal flashlight and struck the pipe forcefully. The sound reverberated for a moment before falling silent. Hello? Is anyone there? Simmons shouted. One of the men in blue hats shook his head. His face was bright red as he confronted the other men in the room. Look, I understand we can all hear them through that pipe, but I assure you, none of this is making any sense. My father rose to his feet. They are in there somewhere. Send only text, no instructions or comments. We must locate an entry point to that chamber. Where might it be? The fellow let out a dismissive chuckle. You're failing to comprehend my words. For heaven's sake. Not a single one of you is. Remain calm, Carter, Hopper advised. his arms clasped across his torso. The man remained stationary, then brought his gaze downward. He then fixed his attention directly on the conduit, his eyes intensely concentrated. That conduit was left unattended for a considerable period, many years prior. It leads nowhere, only to a solid expanse of concrete, one layer upon another, endlessly. Its original purpose was to manage surplus flow, but those intentions were abandoned in favor of an alternate project. I was present when it was installed. I assure you, it is not linked to any other system, neither to other conduits nor to adjacent chambers. So confined, even a very young child couldn't manage to squeeze through. There is absolutely nothing within it. The chamber became completely still. Every gaze was fixed upon the conduit protruding from the wall. Only the voices of the youngsters resonated within the hushed space. This concludes the first segment of the body camera recording. Alright, that concludes the initial section of this narrative. The second installment has not yet been released, but we will be alerted the moment it becomes available, and I will certainly be sharing it on this platform. Please share your theories regarding the whereabouts of those children, or what may have befallen them, as this account has truly captivated my attention. A special acknowledgement to my channel's patrons. Your backing is immensely valued. Should you wish to further contribute to the channel's endeavors, the relevant link is provided below in the description, though this is entirely voluntary and not at all obligatory. If you enjoyed today's presentation, kindly remember to give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I will connect with you again in the subsequent upload. Farewell.